And just like that, y'all, the G League Ignite are no more. So for those of you unfamiliar, the G League Ignite was something that came about, and I want to say it was like April or March of 2020. So like right before like COVID really became a thing. And it was the NBA's way of trying to combat the fact that there was no NIL in college basketball yet. There was this whole problem where like dudes are going to college basketball. They need cash right now. They're like, look, we're too good to be playing college basketball anyway. Is there a way that we can just make some money? And the NCAA was like, no. So the NBA offered an alternative. They said, hey, we've got the G League, which is their developmental league. And they said, you know what? We're going to have a place where we're going to invite some of the top prospects in the country to make like $700,000 or something for the year. And you guys get to play here. We'll put you with some NBA style coaches, some NBA style players. You guys can play and develop in the G League for a bit. And then you can go into the draft after that. You don't have to go to class. You can make some money. You can just focus on basketball all year round. Like, it was a really, really good idea. But now the NBA just said that that's not going to be the case anymore and that the G League Ignite is gone. I think this quote from Adam Silver really talks about it. He says, I'm not sure what the future of the Team Ignite will be because before I felt there was a hole in the marketplace we were filling. And obviously now that NIL is a thing in college basketball, there's not really a need to pay these dudes because they can just go to college and they can probably not make as much money. Some of them can actually make more, but there's at least an opportunity for them to make some cash, and the G League Ignite just hasn't really been working out all that well. There's certainly been some decent players to come out of there. The Jalen Greens, Jonathan Kuminga, Scoot Henderson. There's going to be some lottery pick guys here today. I remember Dyson Daniels coming out of there. And, you know, we can talk about those players more specifically, and we'll talk about maybe where the G League Ignite has fallen short. There's just hasn't been a lot of success, like team-wise. I think the team's only won like 2 games this season. Yeah, they're 2-28 this year, so they're not even competing in the G League. Like, they're kind of just going there, getting their butts whooped, which isn't necessarily the worst thing, but what I don't see is there's no development happening in the players either. What I was really curious about when these guys came out of the G League Ignite originally is I'm like, okay, let's compare these to the college guys and see if they are coming out with more NBA ready skill sets. And that just hasn't proven to be true. I mean, let's look at Jalen Green, right? If you guys have been on the channel before, you've heard me say like he's like one of the worst like basketball intelligence players out there in the NBA, at least in my opinion. Jonathan Kuminga is getting better and better every year, but he still has an underdeveloped skill set. Scoot Henderson's had a rough start to things. I want to attribute that probably more so to the fact that there's a tough roster around him, but you know, it hasn't looked good for him either, right? And we're looking at guys like Matas Buzelis this year and Ron Holland, right? And who's the other guy? Is it Tyler Smith? I believe that's who it is. Yeah, Tyler Smith. And you're like, hey, like these guys like look like really good prospects, but like they're not really figuring anything out. We don't really see any actual development taking place with these guys. And you know, why is that the case? So in my opinion, the NBA G League is kind of like taking AAU, but making it NBA style talent, meaning like there's like no defense being played. Everybody scores a shit ton of points. It's very guard centric. There's no bigs in the league. Like there obviously are, but they're not really any good because if they were, they'd just be in the NBA. There's not as many bigs. So if they are good, they just pull them right up. But they're essentially playing the same style of basketball that these kids played like during the summertime, which isn't good for their development already. And they don't have any guidance once they get in there. When they first started the Ignite, it was really interesting because they were like, hey, we want to make sure we put a couple like former NBA players on these rosters too. So at least there's some mentorship onto this team, because my first thought when they mentioned it is I'm like, so you're going to put all these like 17, 18-year-old dudes like on one team, give them a bunch of cash and they're going to travel the country with no supervision? I'm like, that seems a little bit dangerous. They're like, no, we're going to put guys like Jared Jack on the team. And I want to say there was another one. Was it like Maurice Spates or something? I don't remember who it was, but they're like, these dudes that have been in the NBA for a while, they're not maybe on NBA rosters anymore, but want to get another paycheck. So we throw them on the team and so that they have some vets. And if you look at the roster now, that's not really the case. Shout out Norris Cole that never found his footing really in the NBA. And then John Jenkins was in the NBA for a little while. It's like, Jeremy Pargo, like, yeah, I guess a little bit. Gabe York, great G League player, never really figured it out in the NBA. So it's like, what are they getting out of these players, right? You would think they'd be getting some sort of development, right? And they're just not. I don't know anything about the business of the team either. I don't know how much the NBA is paying to like keep these teams going, because obviously the NBA supports this team. Other teams are supported by their NBA affiliates, right? And so I'm sure the NBA is like, look, we pumped a lot of money into this and we're not seeing the return. So I'm sure that's part of the reason why they're closing this down. And they're like, look, these guys can just go play college basketball, I guess. If you want my opinion on things, I think it's kind of dumb that we don't just let kids come right to the NBA out of high school, because if they're ready to play pro, like what are we waiting for? I understand the value of getting an education and everything like that, but take it from someone that's been within the college basketball system. And I'll tell you, I was on staffs where we were all academic in the country and everything, but I've also been around a ton of college basketball. Like, these dudes are just sitting around waiting to get drafted and stuff. And like some of them, they kind of ruin their chances once they're there, because college basketball isn't always the best way for these guys to shine, because it's kind of a weird style of play in itself. So these guys like ruin their draft stock that they would have already had. Like, look at like a Harry Giles from like a couple years ago. He was like the consensus #1 dude going into college. It just didn't really work out once he got there. So like maybe before he would have been like a higher like lottery pick or something like that, and maybe he still would have burned out in the NBA. But he would have made a little more money, right? And he could have capitalized on the hype that was around him. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't still try to like give them resources, like how to manage that money and everything, like coming into the NBA. That's the importance of having good vets on your team, right? And that's something that I don't think the NBA does a good enough job of anymore. I think teams are starting to realize it a little bit again, but it's still a growing issue. But you know, these guys are just having a complete disservice done to them. So yeah, this will be the last class of the G League Ignite. Matas Buzelis, who someone I'm not incredibly high on personally. I know he's gotten a lot of hype and everything, but not incredibly high on. And then we have Ron Holland, who's out for the rest of this season. Interesting athletic prospect and everything, but, you know, again, like has some shortcomings that doesn't really seem like they've been addressed at all this year. And then Tyler Smith, who we're really just not sure about him. Like, we kind of think he might be solid, but we don't really know. I've seen a lot of people online already being like, man, they've seen Jalen Green and Scoot Henderson play basketball, and they're like, nah, we gotta shut this thing down. And like, it's kind of a fair point, right? Like, these dudes are coming in just completely chaotic basketball players, and it hasn't proven to work so far, and it seems like they're pumping a lot of money into it. So that's it for the G League Ignite, I guess. As far as alternatives, right? I guess you either go to college. The NBA should just either let them in right away, or maybe they pull like a LaMelo Ball, Emmanuel Mudiay type thing, and just go overseas for a season. Like maybe that's an option. The thing with overseas is they usually don't play the younger players that many minutes, just because they kind of have a little seniority rule thing. But I guarantee you'd learn a lot more about basketball if you went over there. Hopefully the college game continues to evolve, and it's not so much like we have to try to figure out if these guys can fit in NBA-style offenses. Hopefully the college teams just start playing that way. But for now, this is the last time we're going to see the G League Ignite, man. You weren't missing much if you weren't watching it, but this was it. It was a fun experiment. I think it was a good idea. Just not going to happen anymore, and that's okay. At least they tried. But yeah, that's it for this one, y'all. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and we'll talk to you guys later.